The crypto market is about to experience one of its biggest moments this cycle that could impact price of Bitcoin and crypto for the coming months. And it all leads to whether or not the Fed cuts rates in the next month of September. And we have some huge updates and news over this past week that could impact that specifically. And I want to talk about that in this video. We'll look how that impacts your portfolio at Bitcoin as well as Ethereum and other altcoins. So if you just give me a few minutes, I'll break down everything you need to know in order to both protect your portfolio from big losses as well as help you with big gains. So as always, nothing is financial advice. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, if you don't know, the Federal Reserve Chair Powell is set to deliver his last speech at Jackson Hole that sets the stage. What everybody is watching is whether or not Powell will actually hint at rate cuts here in the next month. Now, before we get into that, there's a few things that you need to know. First off, the probability of rate cuts has reduced substantially over the past couple of weeks. It was just at 100% a couple of weeks ago. Just last week, the probability of rate cuts in September fell to 92%, 82% just a couple of days ago, and today it currently sits at only 73%. The certainty of rate cuts has greatly been reduced just over the past few days. And why this is important is because if they do cut rates, the Fed, in September, it will greatly impact the price of Bitcoin and crypto and likely send markets higher. And you also have to expect that this will also change tomorrow based on what Powell says. And if you're also not aware, we had the FOMC meeting minutes from last meeting in July that dropped this week. And with that, the majority of the Fed actually saw inflation risk as a big deal. They even pointed out that inflation risks were much higher than unemployment risk. Now, why this is important is because the unemployment numbers just came out also, and those numbers were actually high, meaning that more people were unemployed than what the data projected. Now, typically, that might lead to an increase in rate cuts, but with the Fed already saying that they believe that inflation outweighs the risk of employment, so basically, even though that there's a lot of unemployment, they don't necessarily care if inflation is still a big risk, and they're not willing to cut rates and allow inflation to go higher if that's the case. And they even noted that tariffs were going to probably take a long time to fully understand just how much that they are going to impact inflation, and they just don't know that. And with that uncertainty, it's really hard to cut rates. And even the initial overview of the FOMC meeting minutes were hawkish, meaning that the Fed, the way they talked last month, they did not want to cut rates, which would impact the price, again, of Bitcoin, crypto, and stocks, likely sending it lower. So what exactly is going to happen at Jackson Hole as Fed Powell speaks? We don't know, but what we want to do is pay close attention because it's going to impact the price of Bitcoin and crypto almost immediately. Now, as this article says, Powell has actually faced a lot of political pressure, and he's probably going to continue to balance that out with the economy. But the biggest thing that people are going to watch is whether or not he hints at rate cuts next month. Even though he's not going to pre-commit, his tone could greatly impact traders and funds and whether they decide to sell more assets or buy. And it's also noted that he's likely to look at the economic outlook and policy framework that he set back in 2020 that allowed for more flexible inflation, meaning that he's probably going to go about it a little bit more strict, which in that case, that language could be a little bit bearish for the markets. So you have to expect some volatility during this speech. But basically, Powell's speech could set the stage for how the market reacts in the next month or two. And you need to understand that this is a big decision, one of the biggest that we've had yet this cycle in this year. So when it comes to Bitcoin, some key things you have to know, as we discussed on previous videos, is that Bitcoin has a range, it's swept the highs, and it's currently at the lows. And while this is an ideal place to actually bid and dollar cost average into Bitcoin, It's also important to understand that if there is any hawkish language and the markets react negatively, that Bitcoin could not only break this 110 level, it could then fall to as low as 100 to 103K. And that actually wouldn't be out of the ordinary when it comes to Bitcoin, as it's currently only reduced price 10% pullback since the top, and a breakdown to 103 to 100K even would be anywhere between a 15 to 18% breakdown, which again is quite normal even in a bull market. So no, it's not out of the question to see Bitcoin fall further if there's hawkish language at Powell's speech. It's also key to know that in order for Bitcoin to go higher, not only do we want to see Bitcoin bounce, but we want to see Bitcoin bounce and break back above this 116 level. And we do have to expect that bounces are going to come eventually because Bitcoin has been in a downtrend for the last couple of weeks. So just know that if you're buying a bounce, it has to break above this 116 level in order to continue on up. That is the key. If it rejects there, it's very likely that we could see Bitcoin go back down further and hit those lower levels of 103K that I mentioned earlier. So that's what we want to watch, this 116K level for Bitcoin. Now, looking at other altcoins, Ethereum, Link, and Solana all look a lot stronger than Bitcoin currently. Now, as you remember in the chart a second ago, Bitcoin has already broken back down to the previous low, while Ethereum, Solana, and Chainlink are actually holding quite well above its previous low, which is pretty telling that altcoins are actually stronger than Bitcoin at the moment. So if you are buying or bidding anything, it's always important to buy strength and knowing that these are going to be some of the key assets that I'm buying, dollar cost averaging in, and trading when it comes to a bounce. Again, based on current price charts, I do foresee something like Ethereum, Solana, and Chainlink outperforming Bitcoin on a bounce, but yet we'll have to wait and see. Chainlink has actually held its uptrend quite well, if you see, with more higher lows and higher highs. So I do expect Chainlink to eventually break back above this $26, $27 level and then continue on up to the $30 level. Link has been by far one of the strongest assets in this market, and it's one that I want to continue to buy. But the entire point of this video is to talk to you about what could potentially happen this week, as the Jackson Hole speech from Powell could greatly impact price for the coming weeks. And we want to make sure to know good areas to buy Bitcoin, where it could fall, and where to look for it to break to continue higher. So just remember, a break of this 110 to 108 level could lead as far down as 103. If it does bounce, we do want to make sure that it can get up to 116, not reject there, and to continue on up after that to be bullish. Any rejection off that level probably wouldn't be a good thing, but you have to be ready for both scenarios, both up and down, and that's what I like to give you in these videos, and understanding that you need to buy strength. So look at stronger assets. Whenever prices bounce, look for Solana, Chainlink, Ethereum, and anything else that bounces really strong. Those are the type of assets that you want to be in. So we're down to the wire. Will the probability of rate cuts continue to decrease after tomorrow's speech? Or will Powell hint at rate cuts and send the market skyrocketing? You have to be prepared for both scenarios, and that's why I want you to make sure to stay tuned tomorrow as it happens live. And so if you found this video helpful, I want you to do a couple of things. One thing is go ahead and go below. Make sure to subscribe if you've not subscribed yet to the YouTube channel. It definitely helps me out. It helps the algo out. Show other people my videos. And I'm always so thankful when I have new people in the community. Welcome if you're new. With that said, we'll go ahead and continue to keep an eye on the market for the rest of this week and update based on what Powell says. Whether the market dumps or whether it pumps, I'll be back on in the next few days to talk about my next steps to be prepared. So you got to make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. So that's it for me today, guys. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Trade safe, and I will see you on the next one.